Onto A8. Okay, I'm not going to need those. So I'm going to go ahead and put them into one of the bags, set them aside. Okay, so this is another one of those places where orientation is going to be critical. And we have a small locking nut. Make sure you put that nylon side up. And that is going to be the small black ball stud. You don't need to over tighten it. You don't want to crush the plastic. Just check something on the setup. Okay. So we need one of these aluminum washers for each one of these ball studs, and we are going to screw them in on either side. Again, don't over tighten these. You don't want to risk tearing the threads. You might get a little plastic out at the end. And just trim that off. Be careful not to use these little shim washers there. Those are going to be very important. Will keep the bearings from binding up. If you do not have those, you will be in trouble. If you lose one, do not try to finish the assembly. Get the part number and order them. I've had people ask me about kits where they were having steering issues, where the steering was binding. That's always the first place you check, other than to see if you've got a ball cup that's sticky, is are your shims and such in the places they should be with the ball bearings, or did you maybe need maybe you pressed it down too hard, torquing it down, and you need more than one because the bearing is binding anyway. So here's our final assembly, and that's exactly what it looks like. So now we need our little swing arms, which are right here. We can go ahead and put our bearings in. So now we need 3x12s. And we need these little grommets here. These are like a bushing for these to rotate on. This is definitely something you do not want to torque down tight. You just want it to be snug, because if this arm can't move smoothly, you're going to be in trouble. Your steering is not going to work right. In fact, that's what this little icon is for, to let you know that that needs to be able to rotate freely. Now, you don't want to collapse that at all because it will bulge out and it won't fit in here. So you basically want to just approach tightness, because you don't want this to have a lot of any jiggle, or not more than necessary. Just keep approaching tight, like a quarter turn at a time. If it starts to get even a little tight, back off a teeny bit. It should be able to just flop around like that, but it shouldn't have play, or a lot of it at least. Now, you might think, oh, I could grease that, but it might affect the plastic over time, might make the plastic swell. So I would not recommend lubricating it. If it needed it, they would tell you to use it. It's always best to follow the factory instructions, not go off on your own. See, that's a little, just a little too tight. And then just turning it a couple degrees, and it's free. Doesn't have any jiggle. So there is our assembly. Okay. Now this is where things can start getting strange. You'll notice that in the drawing, they have two of those little shims, and they don't on each side. So, oh yeah, here they are. They were stuck together. So they did give us all four. Now, they show them putting them on, but you really can't do that right away because you need to be at this step here. And we're going to need a little Loctite because we're screwing into this, which is threaded. And we need 3x12s, which I've got in titanium. Now, this can be a little hard to see. The shims go on the end of this, the amount of it, whatever amount of it is protruding through here. But as you can see, there's not a lot protruding. If they get off on an angle or a tangent, like where it's part on and part off, it's not going to work right. So let me just see something here. I want to make sure there's no debris in this hole because that bearing isn't quite down far enough. It doesn't look like it. And they're pressed in. Okay. I'll just have to do it carefully. So this is gonna hang backwards, like if this is the front of the car here. And this goes on top. You know, I'm just going to leave one off, do one at a time. Let's see, you're going to need the Loctite. Just making sure those shims don't get away from me. Okay, I'll worry about final tightening in a minute. Stick the barrel in there. Get these two bearings, two shims on top here. You just make sure that they are on the bushing and not off at an angle where they're going to get clamped in between the barrel and the body part. Okay, I'm going to do something that you won't need to do unless you're using the titanium screws, and you have the same ones I have. We are using 12s. Now, my 12s are like 1/2 millimeter long. They're almost 13s, and so I'm going to swap these out for 10s. Just to be sure, because there's going to be screws that come in from the bottom, and if the two hit each other head to head, I won't be able to tighten something one way or the other, and it's more important that these get tightened properly. Ten should be just fine. Okay, let me just explain. You got one screw coming down from above, another one is going to come in from below. If they run into each other, they can't go anywhere. So it's better to have a little, a slightly shorter screw so there's the proper spacing, because otherwise something won't be able to be properly tightened, because those screws will hit each other and then something's going to be loose. Also, when you're tightening these, doing the final tightening like I'm about to do with the hex driver, don't over tighten them, because you've got Loctite, so it doesn't matter. You want to make sure these things, that there's no binding, that these things move freely. You don't want it to be loose, but you don't want to be cranking down on it super tight The Loctite will keep it from loosening up and being a problem later. So that assembly is now done. So now we need our front piece here, and you're going to get that out of your A3 bag, and I am going to be using the Stifzel aftermarket pieces there for these, just because it's tougher plastic. It's not a matter of flex, it's a matter of ball studs not pulling out in a crash. Now they give you two different ones. These are for the 22 cars in general. So they give you one of each. The way you can tell the difference is right here, there's nothing, and right here it says SZL for Stifzel. If I'm using the sway bars, which I am going to most likely, so I'm going to use this part, I'm going to cast aside, and I'll either be using this or this, depending on whether I'm using a sway bar. Now, since I may use sway bars and likely will, because of the type of tracks, I'm always going to have this piece on. So I'll also be setting this aside. Now, if you want to run sway bars, you can assemble your car with this piece for now that comes with it, and then when you order yourself a front sway bar kit, it should come with this piece here with the extra, the extra tab and the groove for the sway bar. Okay, so we need two 4.8 by 10s. And I'm going to use a couple of titanium ones. Just smoother, highly polished. Those are going to go inboard. Okay, put in our two lock nuts, press them in. There we go. Now, These you're never going to see again because they're going to be kind of hiding underneath here. Well, you can see the edges of them, but you're never going to take them out. So we need a 3x8. I'm using a 30-gram brass block for the swing arms. This may seem counterproductive to the way I normally build as light as I can. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video when I was doing the unboxing, I said that I was going to build this for mod class, and so I was going to add extra weight in the beginning to make the car a little more docile, and then I'll take weight off for tuning and as I develop the feel for the car. But right off the bat, I want to have it a little heavier, keep it planted better, and because again it's a two-wheel drive, they tend to be little wheelie machines. It's hard to keep the front end on the ground, which means you don't steer. So this should help mitigate that, at least right off the bat. Let's see, we need 3x16 and 3x14s. So I've got those. See if those fit. They may be a little long. Okay, now one thing that I've learned putting the Losi kits together is that you want to put on that steering, the bell crank, before you bolt this down. Otherwise it can be very hard to snap this on. See? Much easier once it's together. I'm just going to screw this in initially to make sure. This is where the two screws I was saying would bump up against each other, or could. So I'm going to test one of them because I'll put a little Loctite in there. And good thing that I went with the slightly shorter screws up top. It's not going to take a lot because there's probably already some in there. if you're trying to add a little nose weight to this car and you want to do it in the, you want to put the least weight and get the most bang for the buck, or for the effort, either this piece or the little shim, the little plastic shim that goes between them, shown right here and here. That can be gotten in brass, I believe, as well. And that's, I think, 12 grams as opposed to the big 30-gram block here. So, because it's as far forward as you're going to get in the chassis. So. Okay, so we're making progress here, gangbusters. So now it is time to set the chassis aside and start working on the outer suspension pieces.